But it's Rose Conway-Walsh, and if you have a question for Rose, get it to us as soon as possible. She's representing Sinn Féin, of course, looking to retain her seat, a seat where she received over 14,600 votes in the 2020 general election. Thanks for coming in, Rose. Good morning.
Good morning, Tommy.
All roads gritted from Belmullet to Ballyhonus?
Well, I was fortunate, I suppose. I could stay with my mother in Castlebar last night, and I finished late in Ballina and then came to Castlebar. But it did take me about an hour from Castlebar even, yeah.
Anyway, thanks for coming in and good morning. How's the campaign going so far?
Well, it's going very well, and I'm just taking each day as it comes, and I'm actually enjoying it, Tommy. I'm meeting very interesting people, and I suppose the thing about it is people say you're busy now. I'm busy all the time, but it's a different type of busy. But you have a great variety in the day. So, yesterday it was, to Castle. I was a lot of the day in Castlebar yesterday, the men's shed and all the activities they're doing there. And then it was Men's Health Day. So the GMIT were doing stuff, the healthy communities. Then we go on to canvassing in the businesses in Ballina. We had the Chamber of Commerce, this is of course earlier in the day as well. That started at 8 o'clock in Claremorris. And then on to Ballina last night, and there's discussions there around women and the Constitution and all that. So there's a wonderful variety, like some wonderful richness, and it's I'm enjoying it.
Canvassing, though, has changed, hasn't it? I mean, do you knock on doors still?
Oh God, yes, you do. Now, I do feel very conscious because the days are short and you have the evenings then are dark. And I'm particularly conscious of older people who are living on their own and knocking on the doors there. And also families where they're trying to put children to bed and all that. So we absolutely try not to canvass after 8 o'clock. And we try and make those judgments. And I hope in the main we're making the right calls around it. But you want to interact with as many people as you can.
Yeah. Okay. Can I start this discussion with you this morning in relation to, the word change, because this is a very big buzzword amongst all the opposition parties, but particularly with Sinn Féin. Mary Lou MacDonald saying very categorically, never before was it more important that we change, because the next 5 years are going to be crucial in so many areas. What do you say, Rose, to people who will argue change is good in one respect, but if Sinn Féin were to lead a government, it would be full, and I mean full with a capital F, of ministers who have never, ever been ministers before?
Yeah, I think change is a good thing, but not change just for the sake of change. So I always look at it in terms of, if you're looking at an issue or a problem, do you want it to be treated the same way? So do you want more of the same thing, or do you want something fundamentally to change? And I think that's what Sinn Féin are offering across housing, across health, across a variety of different things. And you'd say about the inexperience, but we have all different experience. So I take my own, say, for instance, which you can talk for yourself, and I would hope to be, I'm front bench, and I would hope that to be a central part of any government. Well,
Mary Lou has said, has she not, that if Sinn Féin are in power, you will be a minister.
Well, she has, yeah.
So it'll be a different ball game to being on the backbenches.
Of course it will, but then I look in terms of my own experience. So I've worked for multinational companies, I've worked for national companies, I've worked in community development, I have an honours degree in public management, I have a master's in local government, I have another master's in economic policy. So I think, and I've had years of experience, so I think all of those things combined together would really give me the capacity to be able to deal with what I would need to deal with as a senior minister.
But when people go to Brussels as MEPs, they say it takes them at least 18 months to 2 years to actually find their feet. Couldn't the same be argued for somebody who's never been a junior minister? You could be catapulted into, and probably would be, if Sinn Féin were in government, into a senior ministerial role with all of these civil servants to deal with. Different ball game, Rose.
And I'm absolutely would be prepared for that. But I suppose it's helped me as well because I have 7 years on the local authority here in Mayo County Council. I've had 2 years on the Committee of the Regions in Europe. I've had 4 years in the Shannon, and then I've had nearly 5 years in the Dáil as well. So there's an accumulative effect of all those experiences. But also in my role as public expenditure, I've done an awful lot of work in terms of how things are handled and accountability within the permanent government. And in my economic stuff as well, I deal with this a lot and where the decisions are made. And absolutely, there's a big challenge there in having the capacity to be able to deal with that and to be the minister in charge as you're accountable. You see, what's happened over recent years is everything has been contracted out. So you want want an answer to something, say a health problem, you don't go into Mayo University Hospital and talk to the care workers or the nurses or anything. You go and you pay millions of pounds for a report. So all of the responsibilities have been contracted out. But I think what you're saying is really key, because it's not only in terms of directing and demanding that the permanent government do what needs to be done for people on the ground. It is also to withstand the vested interests. So you have a lot of influences coming from different bodies that want to shape government and want it to be in their favour, and you have to be able to withstand that. It's like if you need things regulated. I think this was part of the problem when the regulation around pyrite and building, how we've ended up in the absolute scandal of pyrite homes, because the regulation was never enforced. Now, why wasn't it enforced? Was it a case that government was too near to the developers and the speculators that wasn't done? So like, I'm so clear in my mind, and I know like Owen O'Brien, Pierce Doherty, all of us work very closely together. We have a big capacity that would be able to withstand that, but also would be able to ensure that permanent government was accountable as well, because I don't take no for an answer, as you know yourself.
Somebody also made a reference to me that, you know, you could almost rename all the political parties as the We Will party. And it's because you've been in opposition, you know, you don't take responsibility for the situation in health, in education, in housing, because you weren't in power. So rather than saying and, you know, rehashing what hasn't happened, I want to talk to you about your housing policy, because housing is so important. Particularly here in Mayo and in bordering counties. I'll talk about general housing shortly. But what are you going to do, if in government, straight away, to cut all this red tape and nonsense around people trying to build one-off houses in rural areas, to be told you can't put a chimney in there, you have to go up higher on the mountain, you have to do this, that and the other. And it's just driving young couples out of rural Ireland.
It is, and it drives me mad on a daily basis, because I see it particularly. I think, firstly, we have to look at the designated areas, the areas that are... I think we're over-designated in this county as well, in terms of what being told what to do. And I've often wondered around people's property rights, in terms of people having their land, and do they really own the property? Really, do they have a say in what happens in it? And we not only have designated areas, but then the government thought it was a good idea to put in buffer areas as well with that. And I think there has to be a full overhaul and examination of that. And it's absolutely is about protecting the environment, but people should be able to build on their own land. Now, you saw today in terms of the prices of one-off housing as well. Part of that pricing is that young couples we want this report, we want that report, we want the other report. I don't believe that there's much need for it. And part of how we get rid of the bureaucracy is to bring back the powers to the local authorities to be able to make the decisions locally as well.
But are they not making the decisions on the one-off houses, Rose? You know, is it not the local planner or the local, you know, there's an individual within every council who ultimately makes the decision whether it will give you planning permission or not.
Yeah, but you see, circumstances have to be taken into consideration as well. If you have nowhere else to build on the land, but it also speaks to, you see, what happened with all, because you had all the planning scandals where the other parties were, you know, members of other parties were taking bribes and all of this. You had all those scandals, and we had tribunals and paid millions and everything for those. And the answer to that was, we won't let councillors or elected representatives have any say in planning in the future. And I think that was a sledgehammer to crack a nut in that sense. We absolutely have to do what we have to do to protect the environment, but we have to have some fairness in it. What's the point in protecting the environment if we have nobody left? We've nobody left in the rural landscape, like down in Belmullet and all. People who have been forced to immigrate now because they've no housing have to be facilitated to come back and to be able to build or to buy a house. The people need homes as well. And planning has to be about people.
Okay.
Patsy Healy, I think, that wrote the book on that a long time ago, is, if planning isn't about people, what is it about? Okay,
sounds like it means you're going to have to commission a report.
Well, no, it's not commissioning a report. It's looking at what's there and it's examining it. It's often how the laws are transposed from the EU to here, to be made work for people. But I've always found that we've been subservient in the sense that, and also lazy in terms of the transposition of European laws. We have to do what suits our population. We're a sovereign nation.
We went through in detail the housing policy of Sinn Féin with Jerry Murray, your colleague. Bottom line is, what you're proposing is that the state will build a lot of both social housing, private housing. They will be built on public lands. The lands will be owned by the state or by the council, and the home will be sold to the homeowner. All fine and well, I suppose, in theory, but we have this mindset in Ireland that we have to own the bit of land, and that's what people are finding it hard to get their heads around.
Yeah, and you have to remember that the affordable portion of it is only one part of our overall housing plan, which would be a 39 billion investment, and that would be of private homes, social homes and everything else. But we know that there's a whole cohort of people in the middle who earn too much to be eligible for social housing and not enough to be able to be able to build a house or because of the cost of it, so it's not affordable to them. And that is the case then that, as Jerry rightly said, the land would be serviced. We have to use the public land to be able to do it. So we have to cut down the cost of housing, and that is certainly a way of doing it. It's not, you see, what you'd be doing then is you'd be decommodifying housing, because housing shouldn't be just for speculate. It shouldn't be at all for speculation. What it should be for is a social and a public good. So you'd be building up your cohort of housing there that would always be affordable for generations. You can sell it on to, or you can leave it to your child, your grandchildren. You can make whatever renovations you want to it. I mean, if you look in terms of, London, many places, you have 99-year leases, and if you're in an apartment, you don't own the land that's underneath that. So it is a different way of doing things, but I absolutely think it's the way it works, and it's not that it would work, and not only that, but a lot of the external commentators on it, people who would be experts in housing, think that it will work as well, and it works in other countries too. So,
but you can be as critical of the speculators and developers as you like, but if you hand the responsibility for building these houses to local councils, what experience do they have?
I think we need to bring back local builders as well. You often find in the procurement, the way things are set up at the moment, that smaller builders are excluded from it. Now, it's not only smaller builders, smaller other businesses in terms of access to procurement is a whole other story as well. But I think it can be done that way through the housing bodies as well. There is a place for developers, but it has to be led by government in terms of what you want. And then you have to be able to have very predictable outcomes, so that, like, affordable house isn't 500,000 as it is above in parts of Dublin. They're calling it affordable homes. And then we were talking about, building on your own land. Well, people are finding that the cost to build is, again, nearly 500,000. That's way unaffordable. And what it is doing to the fabric of our society, in terms of 39 is the average age for a first-time buyer. But going through, we're going to have people here that are going to be paying mortgages into their 70s and 80s, Tommy. And that's very worrying down the line.
Okay, I want to move on because there's lots to talk about. That's housing. I want to talk about migrants and refugees, because we're finding, apart from housing, that this is the most engaged subject amongst listeners, but they don't like talking publicly about it because they are afraid of being deemed as racist. I've asked every politician, and to be honest with you, nobody's been able to give me a yes-no answer so far on that question. I don't know if you'll be any different. Have we taken enough migrants and refugees in Mayo, yes or no?
I think right at this point.
Okay, you're not giving me a yes or no.
No, I tell you what it is, Tommy, because I really think that it's not a static question. There are solutions to the way that we do that. We need to look after the people who are here at the moment, and we're not doing that. And we need to make sure that international protection, people who are living in Mayo, need to be made self-sufficient as quickly as possible, so that they can go out to work if they need a transfer of skills, if they need extra training, whatever, to be self-sufficient, to pay mortgages, to to pay rent and whatever else is needed. So it's not a static thing. I don't like this thing, is Mayo full, is Ireland full, because this is an evolving situation. If we were to say tomorrow, if there was going to be a big industry bought into Mayo and there was going to be several hundred workers in here, would Mayo be too full for them? It wouldn't. It's how we are with society, and it's how we capitalise on the diverse nature of the skills that are coming into the county as well. But you see this thing of ignoring communities and being disrespectful to communities and saying, we're not going to tell you anything, even as public representatives, is so bad. And you are right in terms of there's many people on the doors. You see, as you engage with people, they will say, these people aren't racist. They're not racist at all, but they are concerned that, that there aren't services in their communities and that there aren't housing in their communities.
What they're concerned about is the fact that they seem to see that these people are getting services before they are.
I don't think it's a case of that. What I think it's a case of is that there are so many people who are being deprived of services, whether that be healthcare, be dental care, be places in schools for special needs and all that. So you almost have one deprived group going against another deprived group, when really the responsibility lies with government. We're one of the richest countries in the world, and we cannot have assessments for special needs. We can't have school places. We can't have places for people to live. We can't have basic health care, dental care, all of those things. And so there's a way of doing this, but we have to look at the population that are in Mayo as it is at the moment. And we made it very clear in our policy, the affluent areas, because we have international obligations, and people who are legally entitled to be in this country should be facilitated to work and be self-sufficient as quickly as possible. And those who aren't need to be sent back home
And do you
safely.
believe that there are too many those who aren't?
Well, you see, because the system is so slow, you don't know what's happening. There isn't enough transparency in the system as it is. So that's why we said putting extra resources in to make this a really efficient service, but to be open and honest with people and be respectful of people, because I don't think that this government have been respectful of communities.
Okay.
It's easy just to blank out and say, but in affluent areas, as we have said, if there's a carrying capacity there, that there should be a fairer distribution and location of people as well into those areas. And we shouldn't be developer-led, because people have made millions and billions on the back of the most vulnerable people who are already here in communities and vulnerable people who are coming in, and that is so wrong. That's not the way to do government policy.
And are there affluent areas in Mayo?
There's none that I can identify now. I was going back to when I was in community development, the Haas Index, and you'd have most of the areas there who had different levels of deprivation in it. So there would need to be an assessment done of the areas. But I certainly know, going around, the areas that I'm going around, Ballina and Castlebar and Erris and those areas, you certainly couldn't call them affluent in any sense of the word. There's so many vacant and derelict buildings and all of that.
Your manifesto only was published yesterday, which doesn't give us a whole pile of time. Now, I know you're arguing that an awful lot of your policies you've been articulating over weeks and months, but nevertheless, you were the last, I think, political party, or second last, to publish a manifesto. Just briefly, will Sinn Féin abolish the carbon tax?
Yes, we will.
When?
Yes. Well, when there's an alternative, because the carbon tax, or when there's alternatives, say, for people in rural Ireland, because, no, that's not abolishing it, sorry. We cannot pay carbon, right? Carbon tax is a behaviour changing tax, right? If you don't have the alternatives in place, then you cannot put a tax on people, because it's only a revenue raising exercise, right? Now, if we were in a situation here in the West where we have the Western Rail Corridor, where we have the retrofittings done, where we have proper public transport system, and we need to change your behaviour. Yes, I'm not against carbon tax in those situations, but carbon tax mitigates against people in rural Ireland, people who have to drive cars, who have to get to work, who don't have public transport.
We know that, Rose, but the question is, will you abolish it, and if so, when? You're saying when the time is right.
No, I'm not. No, what I am saying is actually the other way around, Tommy, is saying that we can't have carbon tax as we are at the moment when we don't have alternatives. But if we have alternatives in place and we want to change behaviours, then I wouldn't have a problem with it.
But that's not going to happen today or tomorrow.
No, it's not, until you change the government. Until you change and this is why, because climate change is so serious. We need to put these things in place. You know, we can't just wait for climate change. We've seen what's happened in so many different areas, and I'm extremely concerned about Mayo being a coastal county and the flood barriers that aren't there. I mean, we look at the likes of Crossmline, who've had to wait 10 years for flood relief schemes there. So carbon tax is important in terms of addressing emissions, but only if you have the alternatives in place, and the government have failed to do that.
They say all politics is local. Kieran in Westport says, can you please ask Rose about the damage that she and others done to Western Care in light of the HICWA losing their court case against the WCA, the Western Care Association? Are you willing to apologise to staff, parents and friends of Western Care?
I am very happy to answer that question. So 2 years ago, I started to get floods of emails and representations in and letters in to staff from Western Care, to staff and from families. I have an absolute obligation when I get in the type of letters that I got in, and there was dozens and dozens of them, to pass them on to the authority. I passed them on to HICWA. HICWA did their investigation and makes their judgments. I am very happy to say that improvements have been made in Western Care, but I have a duty of care. I cannot be dissuaded from anything with the same way if something lands on my desk tomorrow morning, and I have a duty to report that, which I did to HICWA. So no, I don't. Saying,
so no apology required, is that what you're saying?
But what I would say was, I will always work with Western Care, and I really commend the staff, and a lot of them are my friends and everything, across this county who do really tough and hard work in Western Care and in other facilities. And they also need more resourcing within that to be able to do the job, the hard job that they need to be done. So that's where I am in that. I hope people understand. I would do the same thing again tomorrow morning. People have to be accountable, and people have to be transparent and open in dealing with it, particularly when we're dealing with vulnerable people. So I will always work with Western Care, and I do want to commend the new CEO, because I think she's taken things in the right direction, and I look forward to working with her into the future as well.
If Sinn Féin are in government after the next general election, you are promised a senior portfolio, aren't you? I just want to clarify that, because people are asking, and it's important because the electorate need to know. Now, I know you're going to say, well, look, I have to get elected myself first. Sinn Féin have to form a government. You won't form it on your own. Who are you willing to form a government with at this point?
We've said, coalitions are the way forward. There's no way any party is going to get
wants to be in coalition.
Get an over. Well, there's no way that anybody will get an overall majority. So we have always said that we will talk to anybody. I think it would be absolutely arrogant in the extreme to do anything else. So we will talk to all parties. We have a very clear programme.
There's no party that you wouldn't talk to?
No, there isn't. No. We have a whole, we have very clear, and you were saying about her manifesto, but we've written the book on health and on housing and all of those things. So we're very clear what we'd want in the programme for government. It's like we talked earlier about the pyrite. We want a full public inquiry into that and 100% redress. That would be a red line for us. And there are several other things in terms of farming and fishermen. We would have a dedicated ministry for fishing as well. So it's about that. And you're asking me about the minister thing. It's not for me to say. Then it's what combination would be made up, and it would be which government would have whatever ministries or whatever. But I would be honoured to represent the people of Mayo at the cabinet table. And there is nothing I would leave, no stone I would leave unturned to do that. And I hope that my colleague Jerry Murray is also with me in government, that we can really show what can be different and how we can make a difference in people's lives. Okay,
in your manifesto yesterday, you pledged to commission a review into RTE's objectivity. Simon Harris saying that this smacks of horrible stuff. He said that the proposed examination of RT's reporting on the Israeli genocide in Gaza is extremely concerning. The National Union of Journalists says your proposal is inappropriate, and said that it should raise the question of state interference in the media. you're quite in support of this idea of commissioning a review into the objectivity of RTE.
I am, and I think Simon Harris should be more concerned about the people in this county, the children in this county with scoliosis that he has let down and sent home. So I won't take any lectures from him. Now, we want to have a strong, accountable and a properly funded national broadcaster upholding the highest standards. That's our aim. So that involves greater accountability and scrutiny. So this is how we would restore the public trust to that. So peer review that Sinn Féin has suggested would cover that. We want more accountability within RTE. We saw the RTE scandal. We saw what happened. We saw the wastage of money within it. I also want, and I've done legislation to bring RTE, the whole of RTE, under the Controller and Auditor General, because they have to be exposed to that in the same way as, you know, yourselves do and other bodies do. We can't have a situation like that. But this wouldn't be like, it wouldn't be a government, whether it be us as a government, would be scrutinising that. It would be done under Commission Naman, would be to look at how to have accountability there. I think accountability is hugely important.
Finally, what do you want to say to the electorate this morning in 45 seconds?
I want to say thank you to the electorate for supporting me for the last 5 years, but on this canvas as well. And I want to say to them, they have two choices on the 29th of November. They either do things the same or they want change. And if they want change, I would ask them to vote for myself and for Jerry Murray to bring a new team to Mayo to be able to really, really deliver for the people of Mayo, not only for the people who are here now, but the people who are going to be here in the future, and to enable our young people to come back to Mayo, so make it a county we can all be proud of.
All right, Rose, thank you for coming in. We will send you on. There's loads and loads of questions coming in. Sarah, I think I should just mention this. Says my daughter and her two children, 4 and 14, are living in a one-bed hotel room for the last 2 months. All meals have to be eaten out of the room, no cooking allowed, very expensive to eat out 3 meals a day. Not only this, but the mental effect it's having on my daughter is chronic, not to mention the effects that it's having on my grandchildren from a really distraught Sarah. This one says leasehold and freehold has been used in the UK for centuries. This texter says, what will Rose do about local hospital in Belmullet? Now, in fairness, we dealt with that yesterday. If you listen back to yesterday's programme, you'll get all of that. This texter says, on a recent podcast, Ivan Yates described Rose as being a Fianna Fáil-style Sinn Féin candidate. You're smiling.
Well, I am. Well, I mean, I've always been a Republican. I'm very proud of my Republicanism, and it's not just
change.
Republican to the border. And I want a free and united Ireland, which I don't think all want these days.
Other ones, just again, just a courtesy to say to listeners, they'll all be passed on without your phone numbers or identity, by the way. Vulture funds have hijacked the housing market. This texter says, Rose is the only one that stands up for the people of Erris, for housing, for farming and for our local hospitals. She knows the Erris people. Texter says, will a united Ireland benefit Mayo? Other ones, why were survivors from the mother and baby homes under 6 months excluded from the redress scheme? Would you reverse that?
Oh God, yes. Disgraceful. Yes. And we have accounted for that, like to say that up to 6 months was excluded. No, and Kathleen Funchion, who's been elected MEP now for herself, so against that. No,
all right,
everybody must be included. My God, they suffered enough.
Lots of people complaining about people's property and lands being split up because of greenways, iPass centres. A lot of people, particularly in Ballina, Crossmalline at the moment, really scared about what they're hearing about iPass centres.
And Crossmalline aren't suitable for iPass centres.
Okay. Anyway, the list goes on, but we are out of time. Rose Conway-Walsh, again, thank you very much for coming in, and enjoy the rest of the campaign.
Thank you very much, Tommy.
At 10:15, we will have Martina Jennings in studio. So if you've got a question for Martina, pass it on to us. But I promise you, all of the questions you've sent in to Rose will be sent to her. But as I say, it's just nice for listeners to know that we've got them all. Direct provision applications is really a huge one at the moment. Climate change coming up quite a lot too. And then there's obviously people who are anti-Sinn Féin bringing in, which they're entitled to do. And again, as I say, there's loads and loads of them.